Howdy, eco farmers. Welcome to the Acres USA podcast, a conversational podcast where we will explore sustainable farming, real world regenerative practices, and the latest innovations and technology shaping the future of ecological agriculture with some of your favorite farmers and ranchers. This episode of the podcast is proudly supported by Azure Standard and American Farmland Trust, two organizations that are deeply committed to strengthening farms, building healthier food systems, and promoting land stewardship across the country. I'm your host, Taylor Henry, the owner and CEO of Acres USA. Now let's get into today's conversation. All right, welcome to the Acres USA podcast. Today I'm joined by Joel Hollingsworth, founder of Smoke River Ranch in Oklahoma. Joel built one of the most innovative regenerative ranching operations in the country through a unique herdshare model that connects families directly to cattle ownership while rebuilding community around agriculture. But after a viral video brought national attention to his operation, Joel found himself in the middle of a legal battle with the Oklahoma Department of Securities, raising important questions about agricultural innovation, government regulation, property rights, and the future of independent farming. Today we'll hear Joel's story, learn how the herdshare model works, and discuss why this case could have implications for farmers and ranchers across America. Joel, welcome to the Acres USA podcast.
Good to hang out with you again, brother.
Absolutely. Joel was on the podcast previously. We talked mainly about the herdshare program and some of his grazing practices. If you want to go back and listen to that, that's a good one. We'll go into some of his background here in the beginning, but we'll mainly be talking about some of his interesting predicament he has found himself in. So, Joel,
you jumped right into that intro, man.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, the social media video that went viral that got me into the situation was not even a video posted by me. It was posted by a local homesteading mom who's like a homeschooling Instagram influencer who just thinks our community's cool. And apparently that's enough to instigate a government fishing expedition.
Yeah, well, you want to give everyone a little bit of background about yourself, how you got to, owning ranches and being a rancher, and then how we've gotten to this point today.
Yeah, I'll crash course it since we've covered it a lot more deeply elsewhere. But I got into the regenerative agriculture world being passionate about it because of health issues. In 2009, when I went to college, I got sick with Crohn's disease, digestive problems. I lost 20 pounds in the first 2 weeks, super sick. And what got me better again was discovering Weston Price, raw dairy, pasture-raised meats, doing homemade ferments and things. And it just drove me towards all the questions of where is this chronic disease epidemic coming from? Why is the food making us sick? Then, inevitably, why is the food connection to the soil, connection to human health not being fixed or cared about in the world? And then I found you guys and many other people in the regenerative ag space and began to dream about doing it right. My degree is in business economics. I originally started in engineering school. I was doing mechanical with a nuclear track. I don't know if you've ever even talked about that, Taylor. But I fell in love with econ during taking my first intro classes as a part of the business engineering degree, and I changed my track to business economics and loved it. I think it's one of the best decisions ever made because so much of the climate we live in today is dictated by these macro economic geopolitics and demographic societal trends that just swamp the small business decisions if you don't understand the water you're swimming in. And then I ended up post college going into lots of startups of small blue collar businesses. I also have some background in high speed tech startups where I did some long ongoing ownerships of all sorts of fun stuff, of getting to see big capital raises and with a physicist who creates new techs and bootstraps them to market and then flips the companies. I got to see him go through attempted hostile takeovers by one of the companies he had. JBL tried to take it over, and they literally just sat him down in the office one day and was like, hey, you're a pebble on the seashore of reality, try to stop us, because they put his tech that he had their laboratory, original laboratory in the country, you could test the prototype. They just put it in the center of their investment portfolio, their brochure for their funders that year, and just claimed it as their own. He had to go to war against them. So I've got this really interesting intersection of background of blue collar, high speed tech startup, big business, predatory, difficult, like maneuvering in the world. And I also originally wanted to be a pastor as a kid. And I actually have a little bit of time I've spent in the world of ministry and stuff as well, which is intersected strongly with agriculture. Because as you know, Taylor, mentoring the youth is something that you just have to do to build anything productive in the rural America right now. Um, so all those stories really intersected for me to where, put bluntly, and I've been sharing more and more of this story and hiding it less over time, I really felt like God led me through a lot of different opportunities and different businesses and men who mentored me. And it all intersected with Smoke River Ranch being founded as a test bed to try to pilot how do we create viable agriculture and ranching systems for the next generation. Because what's the good of all this soil science work and all this advancement and the potential for healing humans, which I think like is how we heal the country? Like how much of our political clash we're having is because everybody's sick and brain foggy and diseased, and we just can't get anybody to sit down with enough clarity of mind to have honest dialogue about how to fix it, right? It's all downstream of just how poisoned and broken everything is. It's all knit together, right? And if we have all this advancement, but there's no youth on the land effectively employing it, it doesn't matter. And so I had the opportunity with Smoke River Ranch to trial out a bunch of ideas of how do we wade into this crisis, right? And most of your audience knows this, but to kind of rattle off how bad it is, right? There is 6% of ranches in America that generate 75% of the meat sales. It is hugely consolidated. You have the average ranch in America loses 1.5% return on assets if you don't factor land equity appreciation. You have the demographics crisis, where there are more ranchers over the age of 65 than there are under the age of 54. It's a whole like barbell problem. You have micro hobby scale subsidized farms. 85% of ranchers have a full time city job to subsidize their farming habit. And then mega corporate farms that are just on the government tit of handout dollars. And the middle's gone. And the middle is where the strength of the American nation comes from, of the backbone of agriculture and the decentralized rural communities. And the problem is 89% of ranches are less than 100 cows, and of that tranche, the average herd size is only 22 head. But Jaime Elizondo explains it as the economically viable scale of regenerative cow calf in the US is 500 mama cows. And that's the disparity right there. If you don't have the scale, and that's ignoring a lot of the other problems of soil erosion and the genetics destruction of the American cow, and how the subsidies of grain have incentivized turning our cattle into pigs instead of ruminants, and there's layers and layers of problems, but that's one of the main pain points. And so I had all this background and experience in business world and health knowledge, and so back in 2019 I got an opportunity for a Greg Judy style low cost lease in Virginia. It was 28 acres that I got offered to graze on regeneratively for $1 a year. I signed that lease with no money to buy cattle, but I knew that God was in it and I was called to it and I was just going to figure it out. And so I was on Twitter posting videos of this ranch I was working to build out from no experience, hadn't ever done this before, but it's just figured out as I went. And I got DM'd by a wealthy Wall Street guy who was like, "Hey, I want in on this grazing thing you're doing." And I was like, "No, you don't. I'm going to be using heritage breed, like early American swamp cows with like the Piney Woods genetics we started with. I'm going to push the edge of regenerative grazing science because I've got some theories about what's actually possible. And these horned and spotted cows are going to have no resale value, and it's just never going to make money. Why in the world would you want to do this?" And he wrote me back a letter basically explaining that his background is in like hedge funds, investment banking, and they were starting to get more and more indication the US is over the next 5, 10, 15 years getting on a war footing with China. And he explained to me that, like, one, he's concerned with the amount of our food security, how it's tied to things manufactured in China, whether that's like the amino acids that go into a lot of the feed supplements for cows in the feedlots, whether it's medical inputs, whether it's like um, the Belt and Road Initiative or whatever that thing's called, where China's getting control in Africa over a lot of the fertilizer, like natural resources and those whole global logistics. So he said, one, I'm concerned about food security. concerned about quality, not just quantity. I don't want to just stockpile grains of dehydrated whatever in my basement. Like I want to actually be able to eat well if it comes down to it. And pre-COVID, he saw this. He goes, the other thing I'm concerned about is being debanked for my political beliefs, which we saw that come true about a year later. And he said, put really succinctly, I'm also just really tired of holding my wealth that I've built in my life in exchange traded funds that are largely managed by BlackRock that are buying up assets to extract from them and leasing them broken to my children. He's like, I want to own real things inside of real communities that is fixing the world to make the world my children inherit the world I want it to be. And I was just like, man, okay, we're super aligned. Like, you're not motivated by money. You and I have very similar reasons of why we're doing this. So we put our heads together. And at the time, I was really familiar with CSAs, farm share arrangements, PMAs, with raw milk herd shares because raw milk was such a big part of me getting my health back. And we just put our heads together and brainstormed because we wanted to create a way that we could have aligned incentives for stable relationship to fix things over very long time horizons. He didn't want to be on the board of a farming company. He didn't want to farm. He didn't want to ever have to like have decisions about it. He wanted to own the asset, commission me as the steward and delegate it, have food security. And that was it. Like that was it for him. It was that simple. So we came up with a herd share program that aligned that, where we shared the same incentives and we shared the same long time horizons. The way the herd share program works is that I have full control of management over the cows. He bought the original breeding stock and put them into my management. Every year at weaning, we split the calves. I, as the farmer, get the lion's share of the calves to pay for all the operational management, my salary, land cost, or all that, etc. He gets some yield of the calves for food security and for the maintenance of the ongoing like replacement of his animals, right? And so that worked really well because it got us both rowing the same direction. We designed the contracts very explicitly up front for like a perfect legal contract does not make things work in the world. It's good relationships that make things work. So rather than just sign a contract that's perfectly like intended to prevent us, either one of us, from like screwing with each other, we just said, let's just decide up front we're going to put in enough effort to build trust, that we're trusting each other's intentions, trusting the relationship, and you're trusting my competence and honesty as a like accountant over the system and as in my skill in animal husbandry, right? And that worked really well because it let us not get lost in the weeds, really focus on first principles of what matter. And then COVID happened, right? 2020, like the whole world lost its mind, and my phone blows up. All his friends start calling me like, "Hey, those herd share things. I'm concerned about all the same things he was. Can I get some of those?" I was like, "Well, no, because I don't have any more land, but yeah, we'll figure it out." Like you don't get an opportunity like that twice in a lifetime. So I just grabbed it by the horns, knowing God had given me something, and I was going to ride it and see where it went. So I got some friends together, started talking about it on Twitter. Literally miraculously, I had a bunch of people who'd been following me for years just DM me. It's like, hey, I want to help you launch what you're doing. And they put money into helping us buy the original land. It was just truly just a miraculous favor. I mean, there's no other word for it. And that's what it's taken to build what I'm doing today because the situation in American agriculture is just so difficult and broken.
So
So,
I get how you are working it with the animals. How is the land? How did the land work with the folks who?
so we had a land holding company that the terms of ownership in the company were we're going to buy a piece of property. We're never going to pay any leases or revenue or anything to the company because we want to plow all the energy into solving the problems, just like with the initiative being a test bed for figuring out how to fix all this and to advance, like, quote, like a different thing in history, a different proverb, like to plant a tree under which we're never going to sit, right? Like, how do we forerun making this viable for other people to do this in agriculture, raising good food for our communities again? And we're never going to sell the land. So basically, the land holding company is a donation because you own an asset on paper, but it's never going to be liquid. It's never going to yield you any value, and it's never going to do any good because we're not going to sell it. And we had $800,000 of participation in that vehicle of owning the land together. And it was very clear that that's just what we were doing. And God just sent us people who shared the heart of let's just create this and find a way to go forward and equip me to go into this mission. Um, I often really get fed up with a lot of the conversations the same way you do, Taylor, in agriculture today of this whole you can farm narrative. If it literally takes miracles in the favor of God, of Him speaking to people during their morning prayer and Bible study to get a young person to enter the industry to launch and painfully launch, right? Me and my team, we've lived in the barn for 4 years. We've not paid ourselves for 4 years. Like, it's even with all that miraculous help, this has been brutally difficult. And if that's what it takes to go, how can anybody be expected to do this? And my team is some of the best caliber people that they're in the upper echelon of the young guys in the country. And I really find it important to be honest about this because I don't want to be putting us up on a pedestal that contributes to the churn factory of regenerative agriculture where people think what we're doing is simple and they can just replicate it because miracles aren't necessarily replicable. But I want to create a pathway that is through us figuring this all out, right? Leveraging that to truly create change.
Now that you've gotten to the point where you've reached scale, you've acquired the land, do you see a pathway that it works? There's no question. I mean, you scaled from what, 15 cows to almost 500 now. Uh,
We're at this breeding season right now at 425 breeding animals, and that's not counting calves and some of the steers we have on the ranch. So yeah, we grew
yeah.
fast, and that's been part of the challenge too, because we've had the operational expenses of a small ranch or of a large ranch, but the cash flow production of a small one. Because as you know, it's a year to gestate, a year to wean before you can actually get any capital out of an animal. So you got this 2 year
Well, and if
flywheel
you're
you got to spin up.
when you're building, it's hard to sell them too, because if you see potential in them, then you want them just to breed back. And
Yep, and then
I'm on like a 3 year like 3 years of not really making that much. But now I feel like I'm in a position where it's like this is gonna be the first year where we actually sell calves, and
yeah, and we didn't start with any UTVs, any trailers, any trucks. Like we had nothing. And so we had to build up infrastructure. We like all of it had to be capitalized. And we're probably 4+ years out to the bulk of our herd being the second generation composite that's really the ultra high density capable animal we want. But to answer your question, I do think it is possible. As I'm seeing this first generation of ultra high density genetics be built that have gestated in the system, that are the genetics we're building, these animals are so much more capable of flourishing under pressure. And then with the high density, the utilization of the forage is so high, the ultra high density grazing, the recovery and the amount of photosynthetic energy capture we can both pump into the soil as future fertility, but also get really lush, dense forage production on a year by year production basis. Like the amount of animal carry that we've even just in these first 4 years of fixing this burned out, over chemicalized cow calf ground that we bought is blowing my mind. Like, I honestly think that we, with the ultra high density, even if we're just selling reasonably, like I'm not even trying to straddle the sale barn with Angus type genetics. I'm doing like just full on Johann Zietzman style, like just composite, like African Corriente piney wood with a little bit of like beefy European in there, like just cattle that are just purely designed for resilience, right? But I think even with that, just the volume of production capacity we have is going to make us profitable over the next couple years. The land of getting that mortgage and all that paid down because we had the initial families that bought the land together with us, and then there was some debt on the property as well. That has been incredibly painful. But we're
yeah.
starting to turn the corner to where we're getting more of the composite genetics on the ground. We're getting the skill built up of our team and our grazers. And that's all starting that flywheel spinning where we're starting to ski downhill and build momentum. And I definitely see a pathway. Once we start stacking that with direct to consumer markets who care about the quality of the food, or cooperative farms who want easy finishing steers they can graze at high density. Like, this is going to get easier and easier and easier. The
Yeah,
biggest pain
so what do you think your market has become?
right
Because
now, what I'm working on is building local cooperative farms to take all of our steers at weaning who go direct to consumer, who want this really hardy genetics because their customers are very quality conscious around grass only, no medical inputs. Because COVID scared a lot of consumers. They just want nothing. They don't want anything from a medical or pharmacological world into their food, right? Um, and so building cooperative farms for the steers, and then I'm working on over the next couple years to build a system for us to finish our cull females, and that just be our beef market.
yeah,
And it's gonna,
that's interesting. That's kind of where I'm at now too. It's because yeah, I think our 2, 3 year old called females are almost better tasting than a finished steer.
me too. I think that's one of the
Yeah,
best kept secrets of
I
ranchers
know,
is
but it's
that
like,
the
okay,
older females are higher quality meat.
yeah, this makes tons of sense then. It's like, let's sell the most profitable product that you have, which is steers, and then kill your calls, and it's a win-win.
Yeah, and there's whole worlds we can explore there of what's really possible with nutrient density through adapted genetics, not having to burn a lot of their energy and nutrition stores on survival, on really highly biodiverse pastures, which ultra high density helps us create, of like finishing practices. I want to get into Kenneth Hamilton style fermented forages for the last like 60 to 90 days. Um, and then we're getting really into the details too on how the animals are butchered and processed, which like that could be 10 hours of conversation in itself. And we're building our way there. The biggest pain point though has really honestly been the labor. I know basically everybody I know in the industry or even in the blue collar field in rural America has just drawn their business down to being what they can run themselves because the labor markets are just so broken. And if it wasn't for some really quality young guys who have committed to build this with me, I don't think I'd be making it. But between having the herd share families, which we have about 40 families now, and that's enabled us with the long time horizons of those families and the capitalization to scale to be able to put in enough blood and sweat and tears to get the flywheel spun up. It's taken both. And then because of their commitment, I've been able to get here to where this is going to be profitable and work. And then everything else, as we get that built, is going to be icing on the cake. So I do see a pathway, but it's a pathway rooted in long time horizon views of looking at things through first principles, building real value versus competing as a low input commodity. Now, granted, we're pretty low input because of the way that like we're just pushing them with ultra high density, but the model has been more around driving profitability through increasing carry capacity versus trying to just be the lowest cost producer. Um, that's all working to drive it, but I don't know if somebody without community and capital and scale and labor, without those key pieces together, could overcome it. And that's the argument I keep making. Like I made, you heard me at Acres when I spoke with you guys for the Eco Ag conference of like, look, like we have to stop thinking with spreadsheet brain like VCs. We have to think as communities over long time horizons of resilience and health of our families and just be willing to slow down and bring together at scale. Like the whole, I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps and go into the frontier alone. Like it's a LARP. That's not how it worked even in early American cowboy history. Everybody went west as wagon trains of families, right? Like they went together. Like you need that three strand cord. So like when one falls down, there's another to pick them back up again, right? Like this is never a world that was meant to be something that's done alone. And between the families giving us the scale of capital from their participation as members, and then the young guys working with me to sweat and bleed for the vision together, we've been able to overcome the challenges to get to where I do believe this is going to. Honest answer, I think we're probably 2-ish years from being really solidly cash flowing on steer and meat sales.
Yeah.
We're doing well because of the backing of the families, and honestly, like the lawfare would have burned my treasury, but we've gotten some pretty good donations from the community. We've gotten, I don't know, over 125 grand of help already for dealing with the lawfare and combating the tyranny. Um, if it wasn't for that, though, like the lawfare would have broken me because we were in that process of spinning that cash flow flywheel up, and we're a year or two out from that really ticking and burning the treasury down just to have permission to do business by fighting off the government would have broken it. So thank God that I invested my life in building good relationships I could fall back on and not just trying to build a perfect bank account, because a perfect bank account's not enough here. It's the friends calling in favors, the people helping with things, the donations. Like, that's what's made this survive. But yeah, that's a longer answer to that short question.
The journey of trying to eat healthier foods is it can be a very complicated one. Sometimes the complication is just as simple as where do you find the right foods? And one of the things that is incredible about Azure is that they've taken that complexity and really simplified it. Everything you get from Azure is, clean food. Just the simplicity of it, to have that is amazing.
For more information, visit azurestandard.com.
No, it's true. It's yeah, you need a community to make this work. I wouldn't have gotten where I am right now without my family and then the connections that I made, the relationships that I've made. I mean, that's been the story of my life too. And yeah, I mean, it's difficult to tell people to get involved with farming because you're in the same position that I am. Like you've gone through the pain of it, and it is awesome. There is no question about it. There's something innate in you that is drawn to the land, and when you start working with cattle, and you're one of those people that get, bit by that bug, it's hard to beat that. But yeah, it's impossible to do those things without a lot of pain too. And all the stories are consistent. Anyone I talk to, everyone's gone through hard times.
Yeah, the
And
the the joy of being faithful to like the earliest mandate, right? Be fruitful, multiply, go and take dominion, of stewarding the garden and getting to co-author with creation to see the emergent life and vitalism and beauty of the world around you just resurrecting before your eyes. Like it's just so incredible to get to participate in. And even with the miracles and the advantages that I just listed, if I was doing this now, I don't know if it'd work. I mean, looking back,
a
hindsight's
lot has changed
2020.
in 5 years.
A lot's changed in 5 years. Cattle prices are higher. Land prices are higher. There's a lot more that's disruptive of trying to do this that just make the barrier of entry even higher. But like even without that, looking back, if I'd known how hard this was going to be, I mean, because I was a little naive. I knew it'd be bad. I didn't think it'd be this bad.
But you have
It,
to be naive because what I would do when I would listen to people when I was learning about it and trying to get into it is I would just like shut my ears off to the bad stuff. Like whatever. Like I hear Gabe Brown talking about running cattle, selling direct to consumer, running these multi-species blends and making a living. I didn't listen to the 4 years of where he thought he was gonna, lose everything.
yeah,
And you kind of need that because most likely you're gonna experience it too. And if you go into something thinking that like there's gonna be times when you don't know what to do and you might be screwed, you wouldn't have done it. And you just got to have the resolve and the problem solving. You having an engineering background, I don't know if I knew that or not, but that is par for the course. I would say it's like 60% of the people I talk to that are in this world that are I would consider successful have some sort of engineering background because that is the mindset, the brain that makes this all work. I mean, it's truly a daily problem solving thing.
yep. Iterate, OODA loop, fail forward. Yeah, the challenges. I didn't close my ears. I listened to all that advice. Like one of my mentors, I always call him my sage. He's my wizard. He would always tell me two things. It's like in order to fix anything in the world, you have to be willing to look at how deep the darkness goes. Because if you're not willing to face that with eyes wide open, you can't shine the light there. And the other was miracles take a lot of hard work, so you have to hold open the space until they arrive. And I did the best I could to look at that eyes wide open. And the one that I grossly overestimated or underestimated was the challenges of just the labor market. I thought that like my skill at mentoring and like charisma to inspire people, I'm like, oh, I'll bet a dance right through that. That has been brutal, 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 brutal. And we made it, but it feels like it's just purely miracles that we did. From we were able to skate through having a little help here, a little help there. We had like some of the herdshare owners come and volunteer at key times, and then just the two unbreakable men that chose to stand beside me and just weather it all to get there. Um, but like guys like you and I, Taylor, I honestly feel like to whom much is given, much is required. We put, frankly, I mean, we're some of the more intelligent, gritty guys in our generation who have been gifted by God a diverse background that makes us capable of putting together pieces that a lot of other people wouldn't be able to cross pollinate, right? And it's our duty to forerun this to where it doesn't take somebody who's the upper echelon of the generation to accomplish it. And I'm not convinced we're there yet because of the level of difficulties I'm facing with lawfare and regulation. Because, like, you could do everything right, like you and I are doing, to get a lot of pieces in place, and then the infinitely funded government just decides to come just burn you down. But I'm hopeful that there's enough hunger for change that if you and I and all the community and consumers that want this world to shift stay the course, we're going to be able to find a way to get our country back. I have to believe that, because if I
You
don't, then
have
I'm
to.
staying here and doing it.
Yeah, you have to believe it. It seems unbelievable right now, but what would be the point of, I mean, what else are we gonna live for?
I mean, put frankly, the battle for the world against the globalist agenda and the Malthusian hatred of humans that treat humans as a virus rather than humans as children of God and stewards of the world. Because we're the keystone species. The earth cannot flourish without us, but there's this huge push right now that thinks the world would be best if we were all dead. And it's this like nihilism of self-hatred and destruction that's so rooted, and not just in Western, but just across the world right now, that's just infecting every nation. And my belief is that the battle for that is going to come to a peak in the US. We have a federalist system of local states' rights that, yes, has been hugely eroded since Abraham Lincoln on. But we have a creation story as a people rooted in freedom and self sovereignty. And in hardship, people always revert to their creation story. We have a population of people that, yes, while getting massively diluted by all sorts of programs importing people against the American root stock, um, it's still there of people who came here fleeing tyranny, wanting to build a world, wading into the frontiers of the strongest and most cunning and creative survive to build America into what it is today. Like, that seed is still here in our nation. And then we've got the firearms rights, which has been one of the biggest wins of the populist movement of today, is that we've truly have moved the needle pushing back for that, where there are more privately owned firearms in the US than I think all the nations of the world's militaries combined. And so, like, there's been a lot of times, like, I've gotten invitations by some of these uber wealthy billionaires building compounds down in South America. They're like, hey, you want to come run the farm side of the operation down here for us? We're going to buy 10,000 acres and you can do whatever you want running the animals, yada, yada. And I've turned them all down because property rights are a network effect of community belief. And if you're outside of your culture, you're basically trusting the citizens around you to be the ones that say that your property rights are yours. And COVID proved that a lot of those nations, like those third worlds where people went to buy cheap land and kind of build their own, like, quote, cartel, I guess, um, that there's enough incentive for the political powers that be just to bribe the authorities down there and steamroll people to get whatever they want accomplished. The only place where we really have good soil, pun intended, to fight back is what I believe is true American culture and the shadows of what is left of the American system that we need to take ground back and rebuild. And that being men and families and communities that stand here in America is the right place to stand and pick the fight to try to save the world. And at the end of the day, like, whether we win or lose that fight it's not really that important in my consideration. It's, is this the right fight? Is this the right place? And is this what I want to give my life energy and calling to accomplishing? And I'm just not a doubt in my mind that here in America, in the state I'm in, with the community I have, is the right place, right time, right thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I look at it like, what are you going to tell your kids someday, what fought for, or what you stood up for? And
Exactly.
if we just become, because it is easy just to be frustrated and be like, I would go get a remote job on a computer and I'll talk to four people. We can just go hang out with my cattle and just disappear. But it's not, yeah, that's not going to be fulfilling. You're going to feel, you'll hate it in the end and you'll hate yourself in the end.
For you and I, that would be Jonah, because we have a higher call than that, and God will hold us accountable to it.
Yeah. Yeah, no question. So,
And I find hope too in, like, while I know the quality people trying to fight back for the real things in the world is a pretty small pool of people, and I'm fully aware of that. I'm also aware of what we see in the media of what is being portrayed as normal is also incredibly weighted against us and manipulated, where there is more energy on the side of the truth we believe in than we probably realize looking at the world in general. And we just have to be faithful to raising the banner and staying the course while the people around us are able to maneuver and find alignment into helping create the change we want to see in the world. And
yeah,
honestly, the success I've had building community from nothing around me in the last 6 years proves that to me.
yeah, and it's probably, you don't realize that there's as many people. That's where I like the EcoAg conference because you go there and you're like, holy cow, there's 1,000 people here that are on the same page.
And
But
it's the
those,
tip of the iceberg. It's just the ones
yeah,
you could afford and had time to come.
right, and like they're not the ones that are screaming on social media.
Correct.
We
Yep.
talked about before. We have RFK at an event that he's somewhat involved with, and like a couple of the comments that stuck out to me, there were people that obviously hate him, dislike him, whatever the reasons are for that. It's fine. It is what it is. But some of the comments were like, "I've been sending students to your material for years, and I will never send them to your material again." It's like, well, what type of teacher are you? And number two, like that has nothing to do with the material that's been created, the content that's been created with Acres. Like the Albrecht series of breakthrough soil science that, and then the other people who have taken it further, you're gonna pull that away from them because RFK was in the same event as us, talking about fairly basic things. There was no like strong opinions really shared. Like it wasn't that crazy, but that's, like I said to you, it's 5% of maybe the population, and that's just the loudest, and it's not really worth getting bogged down by it.
Yeah, the challenge is that the real people that matter are those out quietly building things, but they're so busy overcoming the dysfunction, they're having a hard time participating in the bigger fight to get freedom to maneuver and change the actual, like, society, culture, politics, and climate back again. But
Yeah, and it's like, who would, like, are you gonna get into politics?
I guess I kind of have to. I mean, I was in DC
Yeah.
with the lawfare stuff a month or two ago, and my parents are from. I'm born and raised in Yorktown, Virginia, right, just a stone's throw from the battlefields. And so Aaron and I were over in DC. I was meeting with my, like, federal representative, and Brooke Rollins' office ended up connecting with me while I was there, and it was really good. But my dad and mom came, my brother came up to kind of connect with me because I'm over in Oklahoma and I don't make it home very much. We got brunch together 2 days in a row. And I was walking with my dad. I looked at him, like, Dad, I never thought I'd have to be in DC doing a bunch of politics in order to just have freedom to be a farmer in America. Like
Yeah.
this, we've lost our minds if this is like the entry table stakes to be able to play the game in ag.
I
But
know,
like,
and then you think about like the people who are in it, they're in it for the wrong reasons. It's like somebody's got to step up and do it, but you don't really want it to be you.
Yeah, balanced with that too, though. I mean, I don't think there are any top-down solutions. I could be the like dictator of agriculture in America, and there's just such a Gordian knot of entrenched interests that I don't even know if I could untangle it with everything I know.
No.
And I really truly think that the mission is more of hold space to the best we can for local communities to maneuver with our engagement at the political level. But then let the local grassroots movements be what shift things, because politics is downstream of culture. It makes me think about like I was talking with Ryan Griggs with Regenaissance a week ago. Do you know the story of the development of the fax machine and the tech rollout of it? Okay, so hilariously, when faxes first became a thing, you were legally required to send your faxes to the post office, and the post office would deliver the letter because it was considered under the post office's jurisdiction. And there was this huge fight because, like, the law always lags innovation. Like, that's an easy thing for everybody to use as a buzz phrase, right? And it even includes what I'm facing here, where they tried really hard to use the laws to not let faxes become something that took power away from the postal service. And then what ended up happening is faxes are just so damn convenient that everybody just ignored them. And that is where all power is ultimately derived by the consent of the governed. And grassroots populism, where people just do things, is ultimately what politics is downstream of, right? In our national system, anything that violates the Constitution is technically repugnant to it, and it's not legal. And yes, we have to deal with tactically maneuvering through a world that many, many things are unconstitutional. But we have the moral high ground and honestly the legal high ground over long enough time horizons if we have the grit and the cunning to assert it and fight back. But we just need to leverage that long enough to hold space for faxes to get market penetration and the world just kind of changes alongside behind it because the world already changed. And
Yep.
that's where the battle lies, is how do we get together enough local energy to change it at the local level? Like, have you ever read the piece by Wendell Berry, the work of local culture?
Yep.
That I would argue that is like his seminal piece. It is so good. Everybody should read it. I almost want to ask like you should publish this like a yearly in Acres because it's just so important. That piece concludes with a paragraph that basically says that one flourishing local community, agriculture community, would do more good than every government program trying to fix things for the last 50 years. And he builds a whole case for why that's true. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. Like, that's the mission. We need to build one flourishing agricultural rural community. Once we do it once, then we do it again, and the world will change behind it. And that's what I'm trying to do with Smoke River Ranch, is in the ridiculously insane, gritty, cunning guys willing to die on the field with me of my core team, and all the families willing to throw in to help us build it with the herdshare owners. Like, I'm trying to raise the banner of have some moderately insane, dedicated people figure that out together so that we can accomplish that vision of Wendell Berry and then hopefully go on and let somebody else take what we've learned for them to build the next one.
Yeah, so one would think that with your herd share program, in order for you to get into some sort of a legal problem, it would require a herd share member to say, hey, I want my money back, and you say, no, you can't have your money back, here's the contract, blah, blah, blah. But it wasn't that. Like, it wasn't your actual members complaining or filing complaints against you, which, if you think of other financial issue things that have happened, it usually comes with people making complaints and being a victim of some sort. Usually, you need to be you need a victim usually to
To
have
have a
some sort
crime?
of a yeah.
Yeah,
I don't
so
even like
that
calling what you're dealing with a crime, but yeah,
um yeah, the crime is what's being done to me,
yeah.
not me building local food security for families.
So in
Um
short, like everything was going well, and then you had one video that took off and went viral, and
Not even
some
posted by me. Um, yeah, that was one of the first questions my legal team asked with the investigators of the Oklahoma Department of Securities. They're like, "Has there been a complaint? Like, where's this coming from?" And ODS, Oklahoma Department of Securities, didn't have to tell them, but they did. They confirmed there's been no complaints, there's no alleged victims, there's no alleged fraud, like there's no alleged harm of any kind. This is purely they saw a video that went viral, posted by another Oklahoma homesteader influencer, like homeschool mom, that they decided they wanted to go on a fishing expedition against me. And I would have thought this was insane, but I recently started reading Salatin's book, Everything I Want to Do is Illegal, like the wars from the local food front. And I've just been coming to grips with how dysfunctional our bureaucratic system is. And like the layers of that, like you could start with like the food safety stuff, right? Where Salatin had so many challenges with his on-farm poultry processing exemption, where everything had been going great for years. He'd like even been complimented by the guys running that whatever FDA or department or whatever that food safety inspections are under, of like how good their cleanliness and everything was. And then the guy in charge of the department changed and all the headaches started. And Salatin literally asked the guy, well, like, what changed? The rules haven't changed. Everything's the same. He's like, well, I've changed. I'm in charge now. Like, and this is how these bureaucrats
That
always
person,
are.
unelected bureaucrat, probably lifetime employee.
And it's always ego driven. Side rabbit trail, another thing I've learned in this process. These unelected bureaucratic agencies and the judges that give these subpoenas that like don't even follow normal due process. A lot of times these judges don't even have law degrees. They're not even lawyers. They're just employees of the administrative tyranny systems. Like the whole thing's insane. Anyways, the whole thing with Salatin just got so insane of them making up different rules that weren't even technically in the laws. Salatin finally he'd had some college students doing a study on poultry cleanliness, and they had tested store-bought chickens, I think from Tyson or something, and then Salatin's chickens. And he showed the data to the inspectors. Guess what the salmonella difference was between the
It was
two
enormous.
birds? It was 25. It was 25 times higher in salmonella in the mainstream birds than it was in Salatin's custom exempt birds. Guess what the reaction of the poultry inspector was?
Doesn't matter.
Exactly. Like, well, you have to do it this way. You're not following like the procedures that aren't even written in the law. And Salatin was just immediately like, well, that procedure makes the bird less clean. You want a chlorine bath that's shared between all the birds, and we don't do it that way because our way's cleaner. And they just don't care. And that's one of the like 101s we have to admit in the like food freedom fight, is that in this battle with bureaucrats, the bureaucrats do not care about truth. And it's really hard as good-hearted people who like have some sort of trust in a reasonable justice system to admit that to ourselves, that it isn't as easy as just making a case in good faith and that they'll behave in good faith, because there is no good faith. And that sounds blackpilling, but we have to admit the landscape of the challenges we're facing in order to find a way to solve. And so, like my case, right? Viral video. My suspicion is what happened is that there was a giant cattle trading Ponzi scheme that had been going on, as always happens when cattle markets are up. They were promising, I think, like 30 or 35% returns trading cattle. It was like a 4 or 5 state thing. It was a true Ponzi scheme with a trail of broken bodies, where they didn't have the cows. They hadn't paid farms for some of the cows they did have. Like, they were just taking money from one person to pay off the next, and then the whole thing blew up, right? And what I think happened is that one of these investigators at the Oklahoma Department of Securities made a name for himself taking that big Ponzi down. And one of his coworkers who was younger saw the video of somebody talking about our community with herd shares, and decided he could get his notch in his gun and make a name for himself by coming after us. The first subpoena they sent me, I got it on Valentine's Day. My first Valentine's Day with Aaron before getting married. It was a great Valentine's gift. It was so egregious in how it violated due process in so many ways that when my lawyers talked to the Oklahoma Department of Securities about it, they ended up talking to the supervisors there. The supervisors implicitly apologized for the overeager young investigator and how they approached things, because not only did it violate department policy, it was probably even illegal the way he did it. And then they proceeded to, quote, lose the first subpoena. How a government entity can lose a subpoena, don't ask me. At that point, my lawyers thought they were going to drop the situation after we kind of just did some basic due diligence to show good faith with them.
Before we
But
get
then
into what's the basis of the subpoena? Like, what are they claiming that you are doing?
they're claiming that I should be underneath of the jurisdiction of the financial regulatory frameworks of securities laws. That would mean that I have to file as a security offering, I have to be restricted to accredited investors, that I can't like publicize or talk about our community in a way that people that I don't have relationship with like come to join us. Um and the root of securities laws are all about protecting people because there's like a promise of profit, right? You're delegating money to somebody in order to try to make more money. And this is kind of one of the things I was thinking about with even the whole Salatin food safety story. These regulations are all band-aids to how we've broken the system. Like the food safety stuff are a band-aid of how we've created a mega agriculture, giant consolidated food processing and logistics system that's inherently unsafe because it's not done at a reasonable local scale where people could have relationships with the food supply and the people providing it. Like one of the stories Salatin told in the book with the poultry stuff is they were trying to sell in DC, which is crossing state lines at this high-end farmers market. So they went to a USDA processor. The birds ended up having to travel, I think, over 1,000 miles to get to market between like the USDA processor. They didn't package it. They had to find a USDA packager, which they had to drive from like Carolina to Pennsylvania back to the farm for storage, then to DC. Like just insanity. And they went and witnessed the USDA's facilities practices, and Salatin was just aghast. Like the way in which they handled the birds, Salatin thought was the filthiest thing he'd ever seen. It was nowhere near the standards of what he kept on his farm, right? And this is what happens when we break the way that the free market and these local relationships and systems are supposed to function, is you have more and more regulations that end up being put into an industry to overcome the fact that something at the base presupposition layer broke, right? And the same thing's true in my case, right? Like there are scams out there of people ripping people off. And if you look at history, like Weimar Germany, right? Like during hyperinflation, everybody and their shoe shiner was a day trader, and every conversation in a taxi cab was about stock investments. And during that time in history of hyperinflation, scams and snake oil sales and all that stuff just really exponentially accelerated. And it's because of the fact that the monetary debasement made everybody have to just scramble with their hair on fire to try to not drown beneath it, right? And the same things happen in America. Like, we are all scrambling to survive the inflation that's being handed to us by our current macroeconomic policy decisions as a nation. And when you do, this sort of financial immoral behavior in the culture always just exponentially grows. So then we pass more and more and more laws to try to stop a problem that we created, right? So no longer is it local communities building trust, self-regulating through those relationships and reputation. It's everybody is scrambling because things are broken so badly, and then more and more government intrusion. And then once you have a bureaucracy in place, the bureaucracy's incentive is to go out and justify their existence by always just basically either causing, creating, or like proving a story that they're needed to ever increase their jurisdiction. And that's what's going on with my situation, is that, put frankly, these financial securities, whatever legislations, regulations, whatever, have gotten so broad. And I would argue it's because the process is the punishment. The government has an infinite budget to harass you. It's so painful to resist them that most people don't fight it. Another precedent gets set, and then now their authority is expanded even further, right? Like, what I'm doing is not anything super novel. I'm custom grazing on calf splits with a pooled accounting mechanism in order to be able to have long time horizons of genetics development for food security for all the families. It solves a really simple problem in custom grazing on splits, which is who gets the prettiest heifer. And the mechanism of accounting and pooling makes us be able to have alignment and expectation clarity of selecting and handling that for generational time horizons. But it's nothing atypical. This like adjuster and like bailment type arrangement is normal. Like from English common law, where a lot of our law and English agriculture, from where even the principles of law emerged as we see them today in society through American history to now, all of this like risk and product and sharing and resource pooling has been normal in agriculture. I mean, you've got doing haying pasture ground on bale shares. You've got renting crop ground on crop shares, where it's so normal. The insurance industries even ask on the paperwork, like, what percentage of the crop is yours, right? Or like co-owning bulls of breeding stock and splitting like the marketing and then splitting the profits on semen sales, like
Yeah, so
custom grazing, like
let's use the commodity example and how it differs from what you're doing.
so my argument is that it doesn't. And
Right.
that this is so I'm kind of jumping around the story a little bit here. Brooke Rollins' office is working with me, thank God, to help. Um, through some really good friends in the industry, like Ryan Griggs, AJ Richards, and other people who have the ear of the administration, I was able to get put on the top of the stack with Tucker Stewart, who's her head lawyer. And the concern that the Secretary of Agriculture's office and I share is that if this precedent gets set with what they're trying to accuse me of in Oklahoma, where I should be regulated by them, then what isn't regulated by them? Like it just paints in really broad brushstrokes a lot of things that are super normal in agriculture. Because in agriculture, it doesn't fit on a spreadsheet like in the way like normal businesses would. Like we are just local communities that in history have always had these contractual arrangements that are not investments. They're just simply us pooling resources to make possible what wouldn't be possible as single families. It's communities doing things, whether it's pooling ground and hay tractors, mowers, and balers and splitting the bales, or like splitting cost on raising crops. Like technically, you could pretty easily make an argument that any of those are a security. And that would be a huge problem because it just destroys basically every avenue that middle class, middle scale agriculture is used to like resist the consolidation by mega ag, right? And like that's the root of the problem. Like that right there. So what I'm being accused of is violating securities stuff of financial law. For a little more clarity layered into that explanation, we worked with Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund when we built our system. They made a couple points to me early on of like these have to be intended for consumption, and not intended for profit. And the big one is they have to be non-transferable, because if they were transferable tokenized contracts or whatever, then now they're a security. Ours aren't. They're animal co-ownership with a pooled accounting mechanism that are animal boarding or custom grazing paid for in calf splits, which has been common since the beginning of agriculture in America. And the problem with securities laws, with the like way that bureaucracies always have to justify ever expansion of their existence, is that nobody understands them. They're all arbitrary and basically imaginary. And whether you're talking like oil and gas co-ownership of wells or like agriculture with the arrangements we're talking about, you talk to any lawyer in America that's not a securities expert, everybody looks at these and goes, yeah, there's no way this would ever be a security. But then you push into the details of legal precedents that's been created through this consistent overreach that we're talking about of these bureaucracies, and you talk to the people that are pretty deep securities experts, and basically the way this ends up working is you could have all these bullet point reasons of why you don't fit underneath the securities laws. And they'll just immediately look at it and go, well, it does because of X. And they'll just make it up. And that's the nature of securities laws and what I'm contending with, is that there's no real true hard logic behind it. It's just ever expanded bureaucracy where at the end of the day, even if you clearly don't fall within certain of the precedents or principles that would make you one, they just throw their hands in the air and make up a new one. And the real challenge here is that in fighting these unelected bureaucracies, you don't have constitutional rights or any due process. So, like, I don't have any right of freedom of assembly or privacy. They immediately came in just demanding to know the personal identities of all of our members and wanted all the financial records, all the cattle records, which also violates the Fourth Amendment, like unreasonable search, right? Which was a constitutional right granted because of the tyranny of the British just coming in and doing things like this to the colonies. I technically don't have a Fifth Amendment because due to this being civil, and in this case, I've not even been charged. It's just subpoenaed investigation, so I can't even try to file for an injunction against the government because there is no charge. They're just burning money with constant investigation against me. I am required to participate to give them things that they can use to make up crimes to charge me with, which violates the Fifth Amendment of self-incrimination. Even though I've not done any harm, I can give them the ammunition to try to make up something. And there's just layer upon layer here. Like, there's no due process of a real judge having to sign off on these things because it's an administrative civil matter where these departments can just write their own subpoenas, basically. There's no requirement of any real evidence of a crime that's required for them to do this. They can just burn my resources with constant subpoenas. I've been subpoenaed twice. Members in our community who publicly are associated with me have been getting letters. Those thankfully didn't get subpoenaed, but they got letters asking them to participate in trying to give them something to turn on me with. My landlord got a subpoena.
What was their letters like? How was it worded?
They had to the friends and members, or to me?
Yeah, to the friends and members. Because the whole thing, like the basic idea of a security is that it's an investment that someone gives you or gives money expecting to make a profit primarily on someone else's work. So, you would need someone to say that I gave him this money and I expected a profit in return.
Which is not ever going to happen because
right. So how
is
it worded to them?
Yeah, so every one of our members, they're really intensely vetted. Because for me, good quality relationships are what create stability for the community as a long haul, right? So we have a really long packet of layman's language of how everything works, of with the grazing and the genetics plans and programs of why we're doing this. We've got a really detail-oriented contract. And then we'll do multiple phone calls. I usually even invite people to come out and have dinner with us and tour the ranch before joining. I invite everybody. Sometimes I even ask them before letting them join to just come spend some time. And those conversations include them having to explain everything back to me where they understand it all. And it is very clearly not intended for profit, right? Like most custom grazing on splits around the country, usually you look at most farmer forums and it's a third, a third, a third. A third goes to the cow owner, a third goes to the grazer, a third goes to the landowner. Ours, the split is 2% on breeding stock go to the herd owners and 8% of meat stock. And then we have an accounting system that figures out which is which as they go through the breeding checkpoints of genetics. And we talk through that. They all know that. And the reason why they're doing this is because what we all want is to ideologically fix the core problems in ag, which building cattle genetics capable ultra high density grazing on fescue is a huge part of it. And that's a generational time horizon problem. And this is something that your land grant universities and nonprofits should be doing. And nobody is. I mean, that could be a whole nother podcast of how angry I am that all these people being given government money are not doing anything, or philanthropy money are not doing anything even to pursue their explicitly stated mission statements. and that it's falling on the back of me as a young grazer to actually fix this to make it viable. Um, Sorry, I'll get off that soapbox. Um, and their desire is simply to leave enough energy in the system together to where their yield is just basically a rounding error. Like it's just enough for them to have some food for their families over time, but it leaves us margin to develop real resilience of food security for all the families. And so, like, just super explicitly looking at that basic fact, there's no way this is for profit because that's nobody's motivation. If it was, nobody'd be doing this together.
I do think of like when you just read like the basic definition of a security, I can think of many things that would fall more under this. Like I know of guys who they have a shared bowl, and like the payment back to the person who has a share of the bowl is they get a certain amount of heifers that year out of the bowl. I mean, that's clearly for profit.
Done by the work of another running that bowl.
Yeah.
Or grain co-ops where you pool grain produced together into common processing, market together, and split the profits. That's not a security. CSAs are farm boxes to where many of them you pay upfront for the year or longer. You risk share because a lot of them are really clear that if you have bad weather or pests, you may not get anything at all. It's clearly due to the efforts of another, totally and completely, to run the risk of growing that food to provide it to you. And ours, like, we don't ever at all touch cash. It's animals, split the calves. It's their animal to do with whatever they want. They can take it off the farm, take it to a butcher and turn it into meat. They can take it off the farm and put it in their own backyard. They can take it off the farm and drive it around and try to find somebody to sell it to. Like, I'm not marketing anything for the profit of the members. I'm just boarding their animals, and they're paying me to board their animals in a split of the calves. And it's just that simple. So I 100% agree with you that this precedent of this bureaucracy, of all this financial stuff, if it gets its claws into ag, it's a huge problem for a ton of different types of structures and common practices.
Right, because it comes down to like, are you selling people an investment, which you say you're not. It doesn't seem like it would be. I mean, get into the cattle world, you're not going to make a bunch of money on that.
And we're not even trying to. It's just like a CSA, but we're just owning animals together with trying to solve the problems of genetics and things and food security by sharing it together. Because a lot of our families.
The key to me is like, if people who are investing the money are expecting to participate in profits for them. And then yeah.
And nobody with us is investing money. They're just owning animals that I steward for them for the sake of food security. Because like a lot of our families, they looked into doing homesteading during COVID when they got scared about food security. But they looked at it intelligently and ran the numbers just like I did earlier in this podcast, where they were like, man, if multi-generational ranches are going bankrupt left and right when they're already capitalized and at the normal scale for the industry, how can I, as somebody outside the industry, get into this at this scale that I'm capable of it and actually make it? And so instead of doing that for food security, they were just like, well, let's just be intelligent and do this together. And then the herd share structure is just a mechanism that follows the pattern of CSAs, raw milk herd shares, and custom grazing on splits into a way to enable a community to work together because it wouldn't have worked doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I get that you don't want to play their game at all, but if you were to go back and like think differently about how to avoid something like this, like what if you had made this a nonprofit of some sort?
Yeah, I've done a lot of analysis, a lot of these things. The problem with nonprofits is everybody who does anything that's truly disruptive gets eliminated from their nonprofit. Whether like Nasha and the work she's doing in the healthcare space, whether it's Ryland and the work he did with their Kiss the Ground, like I know so many guys who built a nonprofit and they started making an impact on the world and then the board kicks them out. And it's the nature, and that goes back to the brokenness of the nonprofit philanthropy complex of how no problems ever get solved. Like I was reading this morning some of these major, like Make-A-Wish. I don't think it's actually Make-A-Wish. It's one of those childhood like sickness nonprofits or like cancer nonprofits. That there's a lot of these places that at the end of the day, 2.5% or less of the dollars actually get spent on fixing the problem. Like, our whole society has just devolved into tax gaming because that's just such a big part of where the extraction of monetary energy is. And it's created just this giant mess. I mean, there's other things I could have done to maybe make it like more passable in the current frameworks of the world, of like, say, charging monthly boarding fees with like charging them in dollars, but the accounting burden of that's super high, even if I did a really small boarding fee. Um, and but even that probably wouldn't have changed anything because they're already trying to set precedents as a common thing that like even animal like feeding arrangements can be classified as securities. Like, the root of the problem is just simply the way that agriculture works does not fit into this over-regulated financial model that's intended to protect people, and that doesn't protect people anyway. How many people are losing their shirts on the AI bubble right now? That's just clearly incestuous. It's clearly just paying people with product that was never created, with equity that is dependent upon something that's been sold that never even was paid for or granted. It's just a giant circle.
Well, yeah,
like,
earnings versus valuation make no sense if you look at the
Yeah.
history of. Yeah.
Yet, like, all these people can own that stuff, and that's not a problem, right? Like, it doesn't. It goes to the whole food safety thing again. The bureaucracy doesn't care about truth. It doesn't actually care about protecting people. It's just trying to further its own sense of power to always justify
Yeah.
more funding.
I mean, I could go down to the casino right now and lose $20,000 really quick. I expected a profit though.
Exactly. It's the world's just wild. And so, to go back to like some of the constitutional stuff being violated, the other big frustration for me is I never get a jury. Like, that's common law American rights. That if you're accused of a crime, you get to face your accuser and you get a jury of your peers. That's not true in these bureaucratic, civil, whatever. I mean, one, they're burning an enormous amount of my time and money without ever charging me because there's nothing to charge me with. I'm not done any harm anywhere. Quite the opposite. A rational society would be backing me to help me with what I'm doing. But even when they do, or if they do, the way this goes is I just end up before an administrative judge who's usually associated with the department investigating me, often doesn't even have a law degree, and I can just constantly escalate that with appeals to a higher and higher tier, where it just ends up administratively before the judges of the Oklahoma Supreme Court, and at no place do I ever get a jury. And the reasoning they've told me for this is that they say that the common man doesn't understand financial law.
Yeah.
And so their logic is that because the common man doesn't understand it, they can't be trusted to pass judgment on it. That is the very reason we have constitutionally enshrined rights to a jury, is so that the laws that exist that we get convicted or charged by or whatever are things the common man is capable of understanding, and the common man can be a check to government overreach. But let's just eliminate that. Like, you just don't have that constitutional right anymore. Sit down, shut up, right? Like, that is wild to me. And then not only that,
It
right?
is wild. Yeah.
Like, they don't have a law degree for a lot of these cases, which is also just absolutely extraordinarily insane to me. The ones that do, the educational institutions of law, they're putting out lawyers that lean almost probably 90% extremely liberal. And then if you look in the people that work for the government, it leans even more liberal. And because most of, like, I don't want to get too much in the weeds on politics, but I would put really bluntly, there's a lot more money in private practice, and the competent lawyers all stay in private practice.
Yeah.
And there's political demographics of who enjoys wielding bureaucratic power. In a lot of cases, those political leanings are people who don't believe as strongly in property rights and privacy and community and things like we do. And so the whole deck is stacked against me, just start to finish. I can't sue them for the money they're making me burn. I'm funding them with my tax dollars. I have no avenue whatsoever to make them stop. Like, there's nobody to appeal to. And so, like, I ended up, thank God, getting connected with Brooke Rollins' office. I submitted to the portal for like lawfare, asking for help with the USDA. And Tucker told me that from January 2026 to now, there's like 300 and actually this was a couple months ago when we first connected. He said there's like 350 something farmers who are in the portal having submitted asking for his office to help them because of government tyranny and lawfare. Like that's just it's utterly insane. If there's that many that submitted, how many are going on across the country in general? And so what we're currently been working on is Tucker Stewart, who's Brooke Rollins' head lawyer, is friends with the Secretary of Agriculture in Oklahoma's family. And so we've been having multiple calls where he is expressing the USDA's office, the Secretary of Agriculture federally's office, concerns of what's happening here. And then the Oklahoma Secretary of Agriculture has been trying to intervene for me. But with these bureaucracies, these unelected bureaucracies, nobody's really in charge. And it's looking like the only real avenue is for me to request the Attorney General of Oklahoma to put out an opinion that really clarifies the law here to remove this from the jurisdiction of the Oklahoma Department of Securities. And that in itself is its own challenge because there's a lot of politics and mudslinging between the governor's office and the attorney general's office right now. And it'd be really easy for one person or another to decide that, like, one person backed me and they'd want to oppose me because of that person because there's so much mudslinging happening and me just get drugged through the crossfire, right? And so we're working on trying to navigate some of that. And currently as well, Brooke Rollins' office and some of the lobbyist groups of American Freedoms have been a lot of conversations with me. I've had a lot of good conversations with the Institute for Justice. We talked about them potentially taking my case for a little while, but one, I've not been charged yet, or hopefully don't get charged. Hopefully they just give up because there's no evidence of me doing any harm to anybody. And two, their mandate is to fight back and reassert like national level freedoms, and this is a state matter that is pretty narrow with the subset of agriculture versus being like larger spread across multiple industries. And they've got a mandate to spend their donor capital in a way for maximal impact, and they're not convinced that working with me is a good stewardship of that yet. It may reach a point where it is. I've had a ton of conversation with the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund, who didn't give me technical, like legal counsel where they like signed off on being my attorney with a, whatever you call it, a letter of representation and all the technicality stuff. It was just, they helped me design the contracts and gave me like advice on it all. I learned along the way with them that they're a really small organization. I was actually looking at their public financials the other day, and like their assets that they have is only like 150 grand. My cost here would have basically burned through their whole treasury if they'd been willing to step all the way in and help me. But like with them, they're so swamped and busy. They told me they'd help publicize my GoFundMe and our private fundraisers, and they've been helpful as much as they could where they could. But like they hardly even get back to me consistently when I email them. And they've not published my fundraiser to their like follower base or anything yet. And I'm just kind of in some ways frustrated with them because I feel like I'm dying on the vine when they're the people who I thought was going to be there to help. But we're also working with AFPI, American First Policy Institute, where I've got a ton of really good letters of support. I've got one from you. I've got one from Juan Whiting at Hinterland. I've got one from Wayne Knight at HMI, Ryan Griggs with Regenaissance, because he's got so much view into American agriculture with the big travel log documentary he did. I've got one from Roger Savory. Like, I've got so many good letters of support. But I'm probably going to end up getting one from AFPI as well. And that'll give us another really good tool in the arsenal for some of these people who are influential to be able to pull some of these letters of support to hopefully exert some pressure, social and political, to help me. But that's just the weird thing here of like, I believe the Constitution and law is being violated, my rights are being utterly trampled, and the bureaucracy is so abstract that it's really hard to hit back. And like, there's not really any capacity in the people who you would think could help you to help. Like I had somebody ask me the other day, well, go higher in the chain of command. I'm like, who's higher than the Secretary of Agriculture's office nationally? Like Trump. I mean, that's like it. And this is where we have this weird situation where I really am a strong proponent of states' rights and federalism, etc. But I'm constantly watching my states' rights and freedoms get trampled. But then when I need help, that's all made as an excuse for why I can't really have help. Like it's just a catch-22 where it's always to my detriment.
Yeah,
Um,
because the federal doesn't talk to the state.
yeah, unless it's in food safety inspections or something where the states have to keep the same standards as the Fed and they're going to use that to destroy local food systems, because of course they are. But yeah, and honestly, I'm struggling not to get very discouraged and black-pilled about all this, but I'm also really learning a lot about how politics and power work in America. And too much is given, much is required, man. Like me and you both, Taylor, we've been commissioned to go in and do our job of creating change in this industry and fighting for the power of the decentralized middle class, middle scale American farmer and rancher. And that's just what this is going to take, I guess, is us learning how these games are played, building skills at it, and then hopefully I'll have enough people in the industry who know me, trust me, and know what I'm doing is good and important to lock arms with me, lock shields with me, whether that's with donations so I don't have to fold and I can stay the course. Because that's what gets a lot of people in my shoes who are potentially smart enough to figure this out and doing the right thing and can weather it given enough time, is that they just end up getting bankrupted. And so it's like, I'm going to stay the course, but I'm going to need some help to make sure that like, I can handle that. I mean, the way that costs just get burned is just insane how fast you're setting money on fire. And it's taken so much of my time and effort too. I'm spending a full-time job of weekly hours or more than that just dealing with this, with like consulting with the lawyers, because I'm one of the few people who understands now the intersection of agriculture with these laws, even though I'm not a lawyer. I wish I was at this point. Of like traveling to go meet with people who are people that desire or potentially could be recruited to help, like just on and on and on and on. And instead of me spending my time forerunning change in the industry at the core work, that's the work I actually want to be doing. And that's really frustrating. But I've been really encouraged with seeing the level of people willing to lock shields with me to help me do this. It's it really is true that there is a culture of people arising that understand the world we're in and what it's going to take and how expensive it's going to be to fight back against it. I mean, the founding fathers, and this is one of my gripes, honestly, at the conservative movement, is the really insane left wing ideology that most of the left wing even hates, to be honest. That's really just gotten infecting everything in our world today. They have a patronage network where they have a lot of this circular stuff, much like we see with the chemical companies between the EPA and Bayer, where like you work for one, hired for the other, back and forth.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of capital that gets spent on politics and like rewarding people who go through challenges for it and all that. The conservative movement, by and large, historically, has been very focused on just always trying to make a profit in a way that honestly is kind of more sadly self-centered than I wish it was. And we don't have very strong patronage networks, and we don't have very strong donor networks of people willing to take on bearing the cost of fixing things. And there's been a couple times I've just told people like, look, like the founding fathers did not expect to make a profit by like signing the Declaration of Independence. They just did it because they wanted their children to have freedom and they believed it was right. A good number of them even went bankrupt by doing so. And if we want to create a nation that's the better nation for our kids to inherit, we have to stop thinking about just trying to selfishly extract more profit for ourselves. And I do see in the position I am right now that there is an awakening group of people of the conservative political side who understand that we're on the edge of a knife deciding the future of our nation and that are willing to start thinking that way. And that's really encouraging. I don't know how big that community or culture is going to emerge into being. We need that to emerge in really strong ways for us to be able to change the country. But I am beginning to see it, and that is encouraging.
Yeah.
Hey all, here is a quick note from one of our sponsors, American Farmland Trust, who leads the conservation agriculture movement, focusing on the land, the practices used on that land, and the farmers and ranchers who steward the land. Working from kitchen tables to the halls of Congress, AFT's mission is to keep farms and ranches thriving. Since its founding in 1980 as a membership-based organization, AFT has helped permanently protect over 8 million acres of agricultural land, advance regenerative farming practices on millions of acres, and supported thousands of farm families. Find technical resources, network opportunities, and more at farmland.org.
What does I would agree with you on all that as well. What is like your legal team's theory right now? Like what's their response? How do they think they're gonna fight this? What do they think the basis of this is?
Yeah, so the challenge is that, as we've been talking about, the whole legal domain here under which the conflict, or whatever you want to frame it as, is occurring, is one where things just get made up and enforced. And that's really hard to combat. And even when we wholeheartedly believe it's all unconstitutional, it's all illegal, with no jury of your peers, no proper due process, like, what do you do? Like, the system itself is just broken. And so we're making those arguments, we're sharing the evidence, we're like going through and like writing like well researched papers about the history of common law and agricultural common law from England all the way through American history to today. And like, we're engaged in that battle. But one of the frustrating things, to reiterate the point from earlier, is that with bureaucracies, the truth, they just don't care about the truth. Like, the
Or
truth isn't,
time. Or time.
yeah. And like, we want to say that the truth and justice is all it takes to win things, but it isn't when you're dealing with an authoritative framework that they're the judge, jury, and executioner who gets to determine whether truth matters or not. And that's the challenge. And so this is where, back to like the patronage networks, we have to do what the people who are destroying our country are doing. We have to, politics is downstream of culture, law always lags innovation. We have to go out there and take the moral high ground of telling the story of how we're doing the right thing, how it is legal, following all constitutional and common law history, all the way through, having the level of voice to get our political and legal systems to match with what America was founded as again, to get our rights back where the law is no longer in violation. I mean, the constitutional precept, like the basic one, right, is any law that is repugnant to the Constitution is inherently like not legal. And America is just riddled with that today. I mean, there's that old study that was done, what is like 10 or 20 years ago, that the average American commits 3 felonies a day or something because there's so many just ridiculously arbitrary laws on the books that are not enforced and nobody knows about. And that's one of the core things I want to talk about, or be a takeaway from this conversation, is that we live in a system right now where huge swaths of what is normal can be rapidly decided to be illegal in ways that is unconstitutional and illegal itself for the government to decide that that's true. We see this during COVID. We saw this during COVID. You see this in the firearms world all the time. And then it takes years to go through the courts and the appeals and all that to get it fixed, and people are getting thrown in jail erroneously during the process. And with that system and the laws that can be arbitrarily enforced, it's often used as a political cudgel. Just bludgeon people who they don't want to be doing whatever they're doing in the world. And that's a problem. That's not how the law should function in a nation. It's not how American was built to be. And it's not legal per the American Constitution or any of the principles in the Declaration of Independence or the Bill of Rights. It's not okay for us to have a society where arbitrary bureaucrats have all these places where they can just erroneously decide anybody's in trouble and then go make their life a hell and bankrupt them. Because if we want to have sovereign citizens of America disrupt this broken oligarchic tyrannical direction our nation's going, those big corporate shadow oligarchies are the ones funding the current political systems with their lobby dollars. And it's now this circular thing of money from the government funding the corporate oligarchy funding the government, and then it just is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and worse, right? And if we want to, as American citizens, ever disrupt that, we need to break the link to where those power centers could just arbitrarily decide to go after and destroy anybody's life. And that's the root of what I really think is happening. Like, I was talking to Adam Lash last night. I think you know him. He spoke with me at the panel at Eco Ag last winter.
No.
He runs a dairy up north of here, good ways. I forget what state he's actually in.
I think he's in Wisconsin, isn't he?
Wisconsin, something like that. I think it is Wisconsin. He read through, we were talking through, I was getting his advice on a bunch of stuff, and I showed him all the places I drew my ideas from. So CSAs and farm shares, grain co-ops, custom grazing on calf splits, raw milk herd shares, and none of these things are securities. And he looked at it all and goes, Joel, the real issue here is you put together enough pieces, you actually fix the problem, and nobody in America is actually allowed to fix this. Because if you fix it and put the power back in the hands of the people, you're a threat. He said the reason all these things get left alone is because they're not a threat. You've actually put it together intelligently enough that you are, and that's the problem. And I wish I could disagree with him. I really do. But that's the root issue we're facing, is that we have a system of laws that is totally now repugnant to the Constitution that could be used as a political bludgeon to wreck anybody's life at any given time. And the more I've been going through this and talking to other entrepreneurs in all sorts of industries, I am shocked the number of people who are telling me stories. And there are a lot of people, like, whether in their agriculture industry or other places, like there's people even Taylor, you wouldn't believe the things they've gone through of tyranny, and they don't talk about it because they don't want to be thought as being just crazy or being a problem in the world. They're just trying to rebuild while dealing with the fallout of it all. But this happens so much more than I ever would have guessed, where good people, good communities, good businesses just get destroyed. And my hope is that the courageous and cunning and high character ones of us can work together to outmaneuver this to get that changed in our country. And I mean, I guess that's a perfect place to plug that, like, from this podcast, I'll have Taylor share my GoFundMe for anybody who wants to help back me so I can stay the course here to try to create that change. Super briefly, I've also really want to have some people come in and help me with some partnership on land. I've got a program where I'm trying to, like, pull in some friends. That's basically a conservation easement partnership program for land expansion. It's me having a grazing lease, them owning the property and doing a conservation easement with Texas Ag Land Trust, them getting the tax deductions of that, which is like 40 to 50% of the property value. And then I actually had a really good conversation with, I think it's Hunter, the CEO of Grassroots Carbon. I was actually really positively surprised by Hunter and where his head's at and what he's trying to do. I really thought I would be more, you know me, I'm very freedom-minded and kind of antagonistic towards a lot of these government ecology, whatever programs. The carbon markets are private programs. Anyways, but I was pretty shocked with the quality of what he's doing and how well it actually works for what I'm doing too. So the landowner would also get carbon credits. And then at the end of the period, you have to maintain the carbon in the land. So the property basically becomes a liability now that the programs have already extracted all the value out of it, tax credits, carbon payments, all that. And then I would buy the property back and commit to managing the carbon and all those long-term commitments. And I'd be buying it back at a rate that is fair to the conservation easement value of the land, not just the like development value of the land, because that was signed away in perpetuity for the sake of being able to extract the tax deductions. So if there's any like high net worth people in the agriculture sector are interested in helping me with that too, that'd be great. That's a whole big idea. I don't want to go on a rabbit trail talking about that too much, but that would help me in our cash flow scaling, like building. I'd be able to take more of my personal energy that's in the treasury right now, helping my cash flow plans, and instead use that as a war chest for helping change the world, because I would be a little more stable footing on the actual land asset side of things. Um, and those would be two great buckets for people to lock shields and help. And then also, obviously, as this goes public and I start dropping like the press release and other things of going loud about what's going on, it would be really, really helpful for people to engage, comment, share, like, interact with it all so that it gets out there in the algorithm. I get some good momentum of like just concern and noise of people in the population vocalizing support, because that's what it takes to create change. Is the consent of the governed is always what's the thing upstream of politics and change.
Have you had any negative feedback from people when you've explained this to them?
No, not anybody. The herdshare owner community didn't flinch at all. They were like, well, we did this for food sovereignty because we were worried about government overreach during COVID, and here's the overreach. Like, so,
Yeah.
like, like, we're glad you're like a caliber of person who can handle this, and they didn't flinch. A good number of them are the ones who donated. We've had over
Because what I
125
mean,
grand in donations already so far, thank God. That's
yeah,
pretty much all gone at this point. But
I mean they're in the position where they're like, if the investigators they're trying to get, they would try to get them to flip on you, but they don't have any sort of leverage against them to do that.
correct, because we're all friends who share a purpose and are in it for the right
Yeah.
reasons, and everybody understands what we're doing. And yeah, and there's nothing that they could flip on because they're non-transferable. It's not intended for profit. It's not a security. But once again, securities laws are arbitrary and they'll just make it up to harass you. But yeah, like anybody in the
But they
industry
kind
or
of aren't they not supposed to be arbitrary though? Isn't there supposed to be a structured law? Like, I'm just trying to wrap my head around your attorneys not being like, well, we can nail on these things and like let's get them to drop it. But there's nothing to drop either because you haven't been charged with anything. So
correct, they just consistently harass me and burn my resources, which
yeah,
that's how these things work. The process itself is the punishment. And that's how they just are always able to get away with it. But like the thing is, everything that my attorneys want to hammer on is basically a place where the Constitution is currently being violated. And we've just discovered through this process that that's true. And that's been wild. It shocked my attorneys. They just could not
like
believe some of the things.
what are some of the main things that they did that violated it?
Like the first one was my lawyers are like, well, this whole thing is illegal because it's a fishing expedition trying to violate your Fifth Amendment rights so they can find something to like come at you with. So like you don't even have to answer. But come to find out, I don't have a Fifth Amendment in this situation. Um, like like that's just a perfect example, a case in point of every one of those situations. That's just what it is.
Yeah,
Of they just are allowed to do whatever, and I like because their constitution was originally designed right. Anything not explicitly forbidden from the people is granted, and anything not explicitly granted to the government's forbidden. But our system is largely the opposite of that today. And that's just normalized now. And it's just utterly insane. But yeah, whether it's the herdshare owners, whether it's people in the industry, we have nothing but broad support. Like my local friends who are senators and legislators or representatives, and whether it's the federal level or the state level, like everybody is 100% with us. But these unelected bureaucracies have just gotten so out of control that nobody can do anything about it.
Who is the boss of them?
Ultimately, the Oklahoma Department of Securities, the head person there is an appointed position that I believe is appointed by the governor. But technically, they're underneath of the attorney general for their jurisdiction. But that immediately puts me into that whole political crossfire dynamic too, which I'm working to navigate, and hopefully that's going to be the avenue that we get resolution of this through. But good lord, the process is just ridiculously risky, complicated, and expensive. Like that's the
Yeah.
path we're taking, and with the USDA and Brooke Rollins' office's support, I'm pretty confident we're going to get through this. It's just a matter of like, what's the cost going to be to my family and community? Like Aaron and I want to start having kids, but like, I'm just nervous about it. I'm just, how much money am I going to burn that's intended to build a home on the ranch for us versus us staying in a camper that can't even stay cool because it's so hot outside. I can't run the ACs enough because they freeze. Like, it's just really sad to be a young entrepreneur and grazer who's so pivotal in the industry of the change that I'm forerunning and creating to just fix so much when the Maha movement, RFK, Brooke Rollins, Trump, they're all talking about like wanting to restore the power of rural agrarian communities, decentralized farms, like restore the power of middle scale ag, like revitalize the economies and health of our nation. And I am one of the prime examples of somebody figuring out how to do that. And rather than me getting supported, I'm just getting railroaded and trampled on. And it's discouraging how just painful being a change agent is in the world.
Yeah. I mean, I
But
will say you are being supported. It's just it is a spider web of bureaucracy that everyone has to navigate, and I'm sure it's none of it's easy for them. And I would also I think it's such an easy political statement to say you support those things. Now the questions are what is actually being done to make
yeah,
that change happen, and I don't know.
Brooks' office has been really motivated because they're getting accused of intervening in a lot of blue states and they're getting accused of it being politically motivated. So they're actually pretty excited about the fact they're getting to intervene in a red state because it shows bipartisanship, which for
Yeah.
them is good. It's just as far as messaging and everything. Um, and I'm getting more than lip service. Like I've got legislators at the state level who are constantly texting me and asking for updates, who truly care. I'm getting introduced around to other people who are like pro bono lawyers who can help me write pieces and do investigations to like do the work that other people should be doing. But like it's just taking a lot of momentum of people caring to help to better like financially accomplish this. And yeah, like I agree. I can't just make a blanket statement that I'm not being supported. I'm being massively supported, and thank God for the favor and allies and friends that are doing so. But this goes back to the roots of my philosophy of America and small government, where our system was built to be a place that the power of the government was restricted so that this kind of tyranny couldn't happen. We've lost that. There's way too many laws, like the average American committing 3 felonies a day unknowingly. There's way too many employees who work for the government. There's way too much of the economy funded by the government money printer. Like, did you see during the whole snafu with SNAP and the whole budget stuff at the USDA's office? It came out that Walmart's revenue, 42% of it's dependent upon SNAP.
No, I didn't see that.
Like, our current economy, almost nothing's real.
You know.
It's all tied to this giant web of shadow corporate mega oligarchy and lobbyist government money printing power and subsidies and handouts. And we talk about this all the time in ag too. Like the cost of calorie is determined by the government subsidy dollars of crop insurance. And that's put us in a lot of the predicament we're in, from like soil erosion and poisoning people through glyphosate in the bread in America, all the way through breeding our cows to be pigs because the subsidized grain has made cattle feeding on grain cheaper versus cows fulfilling their real purpose of grazing forage and roughage on marginal land, right? Like our system has just gotten so top heavy that we're constantly so like just this just came out in the media where Trump is talking about Walmart and the work they're going to do to hold the price of beef down lower. Do you know about
Yeah,
prime pursuits with Walmart?
supposedly they just made a commitment to reduce the price of beef by 15%.
Do you know about prime pursuits with Walmart? Have it'd probably be good to talk about just because your audience probably doesn't. So Walmart has launched a vertically integrated beef initiative. They're targeting doing upper two-thirds choice and they're selling it at a loss. The reason is Walmart, once again, like I would probably allege that this is because they know 42% of their revenue is through SNAP. And this is why there's the pushback
And they
against
have
like
great
SNAP
margins
paying.
on that.
Yeah, and this is where the pushback of SNAP paying for like soda and junk food and Walmart pushing back against that and all that yada yada is going on. They did a study and what they realized is that if actually I have the exact numbers. Let me pull this up.
I can
If
see a corporation like that can afford to have a loss leader like beef, which would be an important thing for people to come to that grocery store. It's always been considered terrible there. If they can actually improve the quality, they would happily lose money on that because their margins are probably 70% on SNAP foods.
yes, so they did an analysis on the average cost per shopping cart. And what they discovered was that if somebody buys a steak, the average price per cart goes up. I think this is what I'm trying to find. It goes up what I think is like $78 or something.
That does
And
kind of make sense.
and so if they lose a couple dollars on the steak, like no big deal because they just made a bunch more money. And then they did like another part of the study is that they get beef plus wine. The average cost per cart goes up. I think it's like 150 or something. I've got this somewhere. Those are rough numbers. Don't quote me on that. It's somewhere around 75 and 150. I could maybe find it later and you could share it. But so the idea was because they get such an increase of value per cart and a diversification of clientele because the clientele buying upper two-thirds choice steaks and wine are going to largely be people who are not dependent upon SNAP. It actually creates a much more resilient customer base and cash flow position for Walmart. So it goes back to this whole conversation of like trust busting. Like Trump and the administration has been messaging so much of like let's break up the meatpacking cartels, like Smithfield and China and the pork industry, Brazil and JBS and the beef industry, like. But now they're boosting Walmart, and Walmart is very clearly publicly admitting to they're building a vertically integrated monopoly with the intention to sell it at a loss.
Yeah,
And
and where they getting it from?
we're advertising that as a good thing. Well, they own all their own farms. They've built their own system. They own the farm, they own the processor, they own everything all the way through to the customer. And they're subsidizing it for the sake of the greater value of the shopping cart to be able to cover all their farms to diversify their clientele of customers at Walmart. And their profit per shopping cart goes up when they lose money on beef. And through building a vertically integrated monopoly, they're capable of doing so. And instead of us trust busting for the sake of creating freedom to maneuver for the sovereign, decentralized, middle scale American rancher again, we're yet again not just allowing this monopoly to occur and be created, we're celebrating it now. Celebrating that we're going to hold the price of beef down when farmers are going bankrupt across the whole nation. Like, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, it does make sense. It's alternative motives. They're
Yeah.
trying to. They're speaking to what you want to hear, and they're doing things a little bit differently, and putting sprinkles on it to make you not follow the trail. The ones that I think are ridiculous is the USDA and NRCS do have a problem with data, And so they come out and they say, well, we just signed a contract to merge all data to make it easier for farmers to sign up for these programs, which is just government subsidies. But yeah, some of them are good. But two of the biggest pools of farmer data in the world then gets funneled into one system who's owned by Palantir, and then you have the guy who owns Palantir, Peter Thiel, drive a bunch of money into a company like Halter, which is GPS collars, and it's like, well, where's that all heading? What's
Yeah.
that? What?
And for anybody listening who doesn't know, Palantir is who developed the track and trace data software and the surveillance software for tracking terrorists in the Middle East. Like that's what they do. And so when he's talking about one farmer, one file, and Palantir, like that's what our concern is. And this is what always
Well, it's like who?
happens.
That's a private company that's traded that gets access now to all this data. Do we even understand how their AI is going to process it and how it's going to be used?
It severely worries me. That's I 100% agree with you there. And this is where these situations in history always go, right? Is when governments get top heavy, the population always ends up getting kind of destabilized, which we're already seeing in America. And what ensues is bread and circuses to keep the population calm,
Hmm.
to allow the government as it exists to survive for as long as possible until it collapses under its own weight. And this is where we are. I mean, my worry is that these programs are to get farmers ever increasingly centralized in these data streams onto the government tit of subsidies to where they can't survive without them, and then allow the free market of food production in America to be capable of being manipulated to political ends. And that severely worries me, and that's the same reason why we built the herd share community of these like zombie apocalypse cattle genetics, because we're worried about where the world's going. And everything we see, whether it's the Asian longhorn tick moving across the country, screwworm coming up from the south, and I saw on Facebook they're reopening the border. I don't know if that was real or not, but like that's insane if so. And
I haven't heard that.
yeah, and like you got anaplasmosis with the ticks coming across the country happening more and more. You got Tyleria, which there's not even like even if you wanted to do mainstream medical care, which I don't do, there's no vaccine or anything for it. So directionally, our community has been incredibly correct in what we're trying to build as far as food security with resilient genetics and building a scaled diverse ecology of insects and birds and wildlife and pasture species that can handle volatility and be really, really resilient. And it's definitely super frustrating to be so directionally correct, be building the very resilient and decentralized middle scale agriculture foundation the administration is messaging they want to be built, and then be undergoing this harassment by the web and mess by the top heavy government. And I recognize that I probably shouldn't be too black-pilled about that because these things are difficult to fix and there are people truly in the government trying to fix it. And
Yeah.
I've seen a handful of occurrences that make me think some of our key leaders like Brooke Rollins or Trump are operating in good faith. They may be making mistakes here or there. Nobody's perfect. This whole thing's a mess. And it's really difficult, even for the most brilliant of people, to handle it well. Um, and I've seen some strong indications of good faith, and I've seen them trying to like what Doge did with a lot of the fraud when it came to a lot of the Medicare, Medicaid like stuff, where they just turned the tap off to see if anybody complained, and nobody complained, and the whole thing was fraud at this part of the department of this location or whatever. And I'm very grateful there's people out there at the political level trying to fix this top heavy mess. But my fear is that we do not have the political will as a nation with the current demographic base to be able to handle doing what it actually takes to fix it. And that's why I'm just more and more focused on just getting local to build resilience and relationships that are strong locally.
Yeah, I mean that's the only option. It really is. And yes, it is not it's not an easy problem to solve, and you like to think that everyone's acting in good faith. It's just like the data thing. It's like on paper, it's a great idea. Farmers always complain about the USDA and NRCS being in separate spheres, and it's going to make it a lot easier for them to, But it all comes back to the same thing. It makes it a lot easier to do what? To qualify for subsidies. Like, and
I'd rather
just
just cut all the regulations and let the creative destruction happen so that the real solutions can fully take root and emerge. Because
Yeah.
like that's one of my gripes with a lot of the
Yeah,
Maha
but
movement.
that's impossible to do because
The whole thing would
our
collapse.
society is built around comfort, and it's built around the idea that someone else is going to get elected in a couple of years, and they're not going to do something to make. They're trying not to do the uncomfortable thing to lose votes.
Yeah.
Like we've seen it. Like, are they going to let a crash happen like that in 2008? It should have happened after COVID. They were unwilling to allow people to go through that uncomfortableness because they're
I
worried
mean,
about getting elected.
we didn't even really let it happen in 2008. We bailed them all out.
Right.
Nobody's really in jail for the housing bubble either.
I just wanted to
And
clear up too the screwworm thing quickly. June 30th, USDA announced a risk-based phased reopening after determining the Mexican states had strengthened surveillance and control measures. However, shortly after the announcement, Mexico reported a case in farther north than expected, and in response, the USDA paused the reinstated restrictions.
interesting. Any cows come across the border before it paused? That's what they did
The
last time
planned
as the feedlots
reopening
filled up.
schedule, the planned reopening schedule was Douglas, Arizona, July 7th, Columbus, New Mexico, July 14th.
So no, probably not.
So probably not.
Interesting. Yeah, this is one of my gripes with the Maha movement too, is I don't think there's political will, and this is the problem of just we're trying to create change in a world that's just really broken. I don't think we as a society are capable of dealing with the pain of what it takes to fix that. And thus we get leaders who mirror that because that's just who we are currently as a people. And there's will to stack a subsidy on top of something, but we're on a sinking ship. You can stack another shipping crate on it and claim you're 8 feet higher from the level of the water, but now you're sinking faster because the ship's heavier. And all of these programs empower the incumbents and inhibit the emergence of the young creative disruption that would be the innovation that fixes this. And yeah, in order to overcome that, like I'm trying to do, the level of pain you have to be willing to go through is extraordinary. And I think it's possible. I really do. I think we can prove it. And
Like,
then,
okay, so I wanted to make this comment. Here's part of the problem. The wealth gap has gotten so aggressive that even if the government was like, okay, we're going to chill out and it's going to be painful for a while, the wealthy top 1% would step in and be like, they would subsidize because they're going to make the money on the back end. It's like Jeff Bezos last week.
like Prime Pursuits at Walmart.
Yeah, so Jeff Bezos last week comes out and he's like, yeah, you shouldn't, he explains the tax system and how it's like 1% of the tax revenue comes from, the bottom 50% of earners. And he goes, well, you shouldn't make someone making $150,000 pay taxes. Well, what do you think he has in the back of his mind? Well, if you stopped the person making 150 from paying taxes, where's all that tax money going to go? To Amazon, because they have the data and they have the characteristics of the buyers to know that like we are getting to a point where we are not trained well with money to where if we have extra money, we're going to one-click buy and we're going to just spend it. That was the whole test of the stimulus checks. Everyone got $1,800 and went to Amazon and spent 1,000 of it probably within the first week.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah,
that's
I
a
think,
that's a BS statement by him to even stay because he knows that if you put more money in people's hands that make less than 150, he's going to get a percentage of it.
yeah, that'd be a really good podcast you and I should probably do, Taylor, where I did an analysis of Russ Green's piece, Total Boomer Luxury Communism, and I layered that over an analysis of the tax base. And John Kempf and I had some really good conversations about it. That is a really interesting conversation. But like to your point about the wealth gap, 50% of the consumer economy is now driven by the top 1% wealth bracket. And that's a challenge, but it goes back to I think there is an emergent freedom-oriented patronage network that's emerging, that there are people that either regret the way in which they entered that bracket, realizing that it was extractive of how they got there, or they just, because a lot of the inflation and stuff that a lot of the older demographics' wealth came from, they didn't realize that it was just done in a way that was stealing from the future with government debt, right? And a lot of them are starting to learn this and wake up to the fact that we have to fix the future because we robbed it. And I think my community with the herd share participation is proof that there is a strong group out there who are willing to be patrons to help reemerge the decentralized, sovereign, free American middle class again. I truly believe it's possible. I am not blackpilled about it. I think that the energy is there. We just need good vision, good leadership, and the will to stay the course until we can get it done. And then we need people like you with the voice out there telling the truth to help those people find each other so that we can work together to get it accomplished.
I'd like to just make it clear that I just inherited a wealth of information that I don't claim to know, or I'm not smart enough to process all of it, and it's my job just to get farmers good information. But I do appreciate your kind words.
I honestly think that your work, Taylor, like you were called to it with the opportunity you got with Acres and your unique background and the worldview and the character you have to stand in the gap where you are, to be a voice that's creating the networks needed to be a key place where the right allies can find each other through the networks you're creating and the cross pollinations of relationships and knowledge you're creating that is going to be the soil in which the regenerative revolution and the healing of the health that people of our nation grows out of. Like, I
Yeah,
truly think you're one of the most important people in the country. I'm not saying that to fluff your ego.
just
Because
on the podcast.
I know how hard it is. I know the flack you get for some of the things you do. I know how hard it is to be honest when the incentives often flow the other direction. And I am so grateful to be in a country where there's men like you who are maintaining their integrity to stay the course on doing the right thing.
Well, same to you, man. I appreciate all the work that you do, and I think it's uh, we've seen it. We've seen it the first couple of years that we've ran the EcoEd conference. The amount of business and relationships that are formed there, and just having that many people like-minded in the same room, that it is the thing that keeps us going and keeps us motivated. And when you get everyone together and you're moving in the same direction, it does seem possible to make changes like this.
Agreed, agreed.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to cover before we tie this off?
No, I'm good, man. Just make sure you guys come and see Joel. He'll be at the EcoEd conference December 1st through the 4th in Iowa City, and we are going to share links. Please help Joel in any way you can. Are you currently selling any meat products, or
So
selling, are you selling like breeding stock or anything that if anyone's listening that wants to, buy something from you?
we're probably 6+ years out from having breeding stock because I'm doing well scaling, which I'm going to just continue to keep as much genetics as possible. And then the poor performers are being turned into meat over time. And it'll be a while before I have things I really truly believe are good enough to sell as breeding stock. And I'm being pretty successful at building cooperative farms for our steers. If anybody wants to join that, I think I'm going to, over the next 2 or 3 years, outscale the network I currently have. It'd be great if anybody wants to be a part of that network. We're in Northeast Oklahoma, but shipping pot loads is not that hard. I'm in fescue country, high humidity, high parasite, super like cold, like wet weather in the winter and hot, no shade during the summer, backwalking, drinking out of a muddy water pond. Like, you can't really put a cow somewhere harder on them where I am. So they can
Yeah.
go about any direction. So if anybody wants to be a part of that, that'd be great. Um, our meat sales probably are not going to really be scaling for probably at least probably 12, 18, 24 months. Just because we focus very much on building the community and looking at the root first principle problems. And we've been successful with the herd shares and building the genetics and the high density systems and then the co-ops for steers where we don't have that much that's being finished as colts. That's not going into the mutate community yet, but we will. We will at some point. But yeah, I mean, then we just have the conservation partnership program, which would be great to have some more people helping us with the land base, and then the GoFundMe for anybody who wants to be a patron to help with the mission here. And then, do you mind doing something a little odd? Can we close this in prayer before we sign off?
Sure. Go ahead and lead it.
Ah, God, we have a heart for America to be a light to the nations, the way that William Penn had in mind in the early founding of America, the way the founding fathers and the Declaration had in mind, were all men being endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, all men created equal before God, a place for the freedom of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Father, help us get back to being that nation again. Bring your people together to let us as a culture live with the character worthy of that. Like as the founding fathers said, we've given you this nation. It only works for a just and moral people. Let's see if you can keep it. We pray that that heart of character would reawaken in the nation, and that we would have the grit, the capacity, the resources, the creative cunning, and the ability to share favor and help with one another as we work together to be that change, to get back to the light of what we're intended to be as a country. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, brother.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
All right, that wraps up this episode of the podcast. Thanks for tuning in and being part of a growing community committed to soil health, land stewardship, and ecological agriculture. Find us on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, and all other trusted podcast platforms. Give us a follow, give us a like. Acres U.S.A. is North America's oldest publisher on production scale organic and regenerative farming. For more than 50 years, our mission has been to help farmers, ranchers, and market gardeners grow food profitably, regeneratively, and with nature in mind. A big thank you to our podcast sponsors, Azure Standard and American Farmland Trust, for supporting these conversations and helping us to spread the information and message of ecological farming. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who cares about the future of farming. We'll see you next time on the Acres USA podcast.